We're live this Monday to talk about the laws of human nature, law number three.
Yep.
So,
Very interesting.
so we're breaking down this book one chapter at a time. And law three is see through people's masks, the law of role playing.
Yeah.
See through people's masks, the law of role playing.
Incredible.
This chapter, since we've read the 48 laws of power and we did a series on it before, this took me back to the 48 laws on how people could be deceptive wearing a mask.
Right.
But it's a powerful law, I think, especially if you can begin to observe, right? Other
it's
people.
it's incredible. I mean, he talks about Milton Erickson, which I think is the guy that pioneered this. And essentially what happened to him, so that everybody knows, is that, he got polio and became paralyzed. And all he could move was his eyes and get information via his eyes. And so he was in a room and he had seven sisters, and he started noticing the so-called second language.
Right.
When they were saying one thing, but he realized that their body language was saying something different, like the exact opposite. And so he made it, he had no choice. He was paralyzed in bed. Do you know how long?
No,
I
I
don't,
don't.
I don't know how long, but it was a very long time. In fact, they thought that he wasn't going to make it. He overheard the doctors tell his mother he's not going to make it through the night. And so, but he made it a fun game while he was there, and it allowed the hours to pass. And then he started noticing that he got a little better and a little better. And through a lot of sacrifice, he started walking a little bit, and then in the room walking, and then walking a little bit outside, and so forth and so on. And Milton Erickson became a medical doctor. He became a psychiatrist. And that must have been one scary dude, because some of the stuff that Robert Greene talks about, that he was able to decipher from people just from the body language, is absolutely scary.
Yeah.
Scary. I mean, one thing that stands out that I read, I had to go back and read it a couple times. He said that he knew when his secretary was menstruating because she would be typing a lot harder than normal. I mean, that is one scary dude, okay?
The one that got me was there were a couple. Cuz I remember, yeah, this story from before where there was one where a lady walked in and he would purposely, and I think this was really cool, he would purposely sit his chair and desk at the opposite end of where the entrance was. So
Correct.
you had to walk a good little ways to get to him, and he would observe you
Right.
in that walk, and he could tell a lot. And with one, he asked a lady, "How long have you been cheating on your husband?"
Having an affair.
Yeah, having an affair. And she said, "How do you know?" And
And he said, your body language told me.
right, the way that she was sitting.
Crazy. I mean, that one scary dude. I wouldn't want to go into his office.
Milton Erickson.
I
And he
wouldn't know how
became a
to walk.
he became a psychiatrist.
Correct.
Yeah.
No, no, unbelievable. Unbelievable. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, and
the
what I mean,
flickering of the eye, a little smirk coming out of the corner of your mouth, telling you, oh, yeah, he's happy with the good news you got, or, he's envious of you. And I mean, it's one of the things that he said, look, in order to be able to decipher this so called second language, which the second language is the body language that we as human beings are unaware to a great extent
yeah.
that we are doing it. That's why it's very interesting, because it's within us, okay? And unless we catch ourselves, we won't be able to correct it, right? So he said this is a second language, the body language, and he said, or there's a study out there that says that 65%, listen to this, okay? 65% of nonverbal communication is done through body language, and only 5% of it gets picked up by people.
Wow.
So that means that 60% of it goes unnoticed. And there's a study that confirms this. And,
Yeah.
I don't know about the study seemed very thorough but I mean, 65%.
It's just that you can, I mean, you were just explaining about a situation of this gentleman that was extremely bothered by something that had happened to him,
Mm-hmm.
and you notice his hand shaking.
Right.
And he doesn't have Parkinson's, or he
No,
typically doesn't, his hand doesn't shake like that. But
no.
he was so, what would be the word? Irate. He was so,
He was so bothered, so greatly upset,
yeah,
so furious. I mean, he was beyond the
that he
point.
couldn't control his movements.
No, and he was like shaking his hands like that. And I know this gentleman, and he doesn't have Parkinson's.
Right.
But man, he was just like furious and
Yeah.
letting everybody know how upset he was. And it was something to watch.
That's the thing, this law really teaches you to begin to observe people,
Right,
because like you said, 65%. I mean, I I would, I don't know where they got that stat and how they got that, but it sounds right. A lot of what you can pick up is in people's body language. Are they hunched over, you know, um when you're talking to somebody, and this was in the 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene brought it up, but when you're talking to somebody and their feet are positioned, let's say, away from you, yet you're still talking to them, they want to get out of that conversation as fast as possible, but you're not picking up those cues. You should pick up those cues and let them exit the conversation. It's like some people don't notice that they're not letting you get a word in. They're
right,
not letting you leave the conversation. Like sometimes a conversation is so good that you want to stay there, you want to be there. And then other times a conversation is, you don't want to be there anymore, but you don't know how to exit because the person doesn't let you.
right.
And they're not noticing.
Actually, that happened this weekend to me. Somebody trapped me in a.
They
I
cornered
felt
you.
trapped. I felt trapped. You know, but at my age now, I have no problem letting people know.
You have no problem exiting the
I
conversation.
have no. I do it cordially because I don't want to seem rude,
Right.
but they know that I want to get out because my body language, like for example, this weekend, there were instances when I was involved in a conversation um, with someone, you were there, and it was extremely enjoyable. We were talking about history and
It was engaging. And it
absolutely,
was it was an exchange.
it was, but he was doing most of the talking, and I was enjoying every minute of it.
Right.
And yet he was doing most of the talking, and I was following through because I could follow that historical trend of that particular subject that we were talking about.
But there was also input.
That I was able to input because he was not monopolizing the conversation.
Right.
It was an exchange, but he's a wise man. He knows a lot about history. He's a history buff,
Yeah.
and he was just sharing a lot of stuff. And it's the way that he threw it out that made it comfortable. He's breathing, he's saying different tonality and pausing
Right.
and giving you an opportunity to engage, but I wouldn't because he has so much to say and it was extremely enjoyable, right?
Yeah.
In another situation, I just got trapped into a situation where I just couldn't get out of that conversation fast enough.
Hmm.
Because, it's just somebody's just firing, pa, 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 and there's no room even for breathing.
Yeah.
It's
And
very unpleasant for me.
yeah.
So
It,
I find a way to cut it somehow. I'm not going to stay there 30 minutes because I'm not getting anything by because I turned off my, you know?
yes. And yeah, it makes me wonder, like, when have I done that to other people? Because that feeling that you're getting of not wanting to be in that situation, that feeling wanting to be in that conversation, but they didn't notice. How many times are we talking to somebody? Am I talking to somebody and they want to get out of that conversation and I am not noticing, you know? It
Hmm.
makes you kind of look at your own situation. That's one of the things that Robert Greene on this chapter gives you homework. He says begin to notice, like be intentional about cues when you're talking to another person. One of the things I wrote down, just because different events we've been to, we do different networking events for business. There's also social gatherings. It seems like people are absorbed in their own world, and they do very little observing of, or even some people very little interest in your world.
Well, we are definitely absorbed in our own world. We're guilty of that, all of us.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. We're into our little whatever, and we're 110% into our world. So we're all guilty of that. In order to grow, I think, and what do I know, right? These are just opinions, and opinions are like noses. Everybody's got one, right? But one of the things that I wrote down that you just talked about and you hit on it is that he said, look, the key to understanding this second language is observe. And I wrote it exactly like he put it 3 times, observed, observed, observed. You have to become a master of these cues so that you can pick it up and you can have a more meaningful conversation
Right.
with everybody.
Yeah.
If the topic is something you don't like, that's going to be tough. Okay. But if it's something that you're into, the observation is key to picking
Hmm.
up all this stuff. And you don't want to put somebody in a position where, like I just told you, I felt, if they don't want to talk to you,
You know,
what are you
one
gaining from it? Nothing.
Robert, I agree. Robert Greene gets into the genuine smile versus the fake smile,
Yeah.
which I thought was very interesting. I
And how do
never,
you
right,
decipher that?
right.
You know?
But one thing you brought up the other day, and I've seen this, you look at somebody and they smile at you. The moment that you turn away, their smile goes serious. So, okay, is that a fake smile? Well, Robert Greene says a genuine smile is, it's a smile. This is a quote from the book. A genuine smile will affect the muscles around the eyes and widen them, often revealing crow's feet, which are those wrinkles on the sides of the eyes. It will also tend to pull the cheeks upwards, and context is really important. So that's what he's saying. A genuine smile is like a full on smile, not the ones that we typically give,
Yeah.
which are, yeah, very just thrown out, but it's not full. So, yeah, I mean, we're all wearing a mask. We're all absorbed in our own world.
Sure.
And
Remember, we just did a chapter that says we're all, to a certain extent, narcissists.
yeah, that was the
It's
last
just where do
chapter.
you fall on the spectrum of narcissism?
Are you a healthy
Are
narcissist?
you a healthy, quote unquote, narcissism? So if you guys want to listen to that, go to the previous chapter.
Yeah, they're all connected. But this one, I think it's a good practice, and not to deceive or manipulate, because you could observe and use it in that fashion. But like you said, have a more meaningful conversation. I think that's the goal here.
You want to have an interaction with everybody that's positive and meaningful for everybody, right?
Yeah.
It can't just be a one-way street. Like you remember when we were in Arcadia, that neighbor, I mean,
Oh,
if we would go walking and I would walk really fast by that house because if we got caught, he just wouldn't.
well, it was a neighbor that was always mowing his lawn or watering the grass or whatever. But anytime somebody would walk by him,
He
he would stop them
Right.
to talk to them.
So I would avoid that area. I would walk to get my exercise around
And
it.
sometimes we would go to the store, and he was talking to somebody, we would come back from the store
and
and
they were still talking.
they were still talking. And that was somebody who was trying to exercise, jog, get on with their day. He didn't realize maybe.
No, and it's
And the reason we say that is because you did talk to him a few times
right.
and you realized
Oh God.
the type of conversation. It wasn't, I don't think it was one that people were really engaged in. It was one that they felt trapped.
Well, forgive me, uh, Lord, but I mean, I felt trapped all the time. I don't know that everybody else had the same feeling because we're all a world in within ourselves, but I did. I mean, I couldn't put out a word.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just one bullet after another. And so, yeah, it's unpleasant.
You notice when people, like Robert Greene saying, you notice when you're talking too much, like begin to listen more. And that he talked about that in previous chapters too.
Sure.
But catch yourself if you're just talking too much. Listen, observe, maybe throw something out there to engage in some conversation, but then stop talking. Let the other person talk.
Well, especially if we're doing an interview, you know, people are tuning in because they want to hear what the person that you brought in to interview is saying.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily want to hear what you are feeling about the issue. You can throw it out quickly, but let the person that you've brought into the interview speak.
Yeah.
And I think that's why Joe Rogan is so successful. He interjects with certain things, like lances. He throws a lance, and then now the guy has to, or the lady, and
But he doesn't take over the
he
conversation.
does not.
One person that does is Bill Maher. I've seen that in his podcast, and a lot of the comments are like, "Man, stop trying to, you
See,
know,
the other side of the coin, I
take
think Bill
over."
Maher is very sharp, super intelligent.
He is.
He's got a lot to say, but
Excuse me.
he should let
Yeah.
the party that he brings on board.
I'm just reading the comments.
No, no, I understand.
Jordan Peterson gets it in the comments too.
Yeah, well, Jordan Peterson,
But to his credit, in a recent interview, I'm talking about a few weeks ago, I saw it. They asked him what is his biggest insecurity or what is one of the greatest weaknesses or something. He says,
weaknesses.
yeah, he says that weakness, yeah,
Yeah,
that he doesn't he talks too much.
correct.
And he says, I haven't figured out this podcast thing completely. You're talking about a professor. He's used to giving
Dissertations.
presentations and
And
dissertations.
professors are, you know, knowledgeable people
Sure. So
for the
he could
most part.
talk all day with one little idea, but in a podcast, it's an exchange. And so I think he even brought it up, which credit to him.
Yeah.
Um,
I love Joe Rogan. He just throws a rock at you and it goes quick. And then you have to address that.
he's good at it. There's another person that's good. I would say even better. His name is it's called Mindset of a CEO. Let me make sure I
Oh,
no.
who's that?
Mindset.
Better than Rogan, huh? He's good. But yeah, you have to observe, observe, observe. And the less you talk, the more you learn. Because what you do, why are you speaking so much? You want to hear yourself talk? You like the sound of your voice? Whatever they're saying, right? So the less you
Sorry.
speak, the more you learn.
Correct.
That's it.
Diary of a CEO. The Diary of a CEO. He's got 7.26 million subscribers now. He got there within a couple months actually.
Wow.
Um he was
How
only
do
at
we do that?
he was at a million or 2 million. He's a well, yeah, I don't know how he does. I think his name is Steven, but he's very good when he has a guest, a high profile guest. He's really good at asking a question and then he just quiet.
When you're bringing in a guest into your podcast, you want the guest to shine,
Yeah.
right? Unless it's someone that it's not preparing the field that you're going to talk about, then you really have to question that.
Yeah.
And by the way, I've seen Joe Rogan do that too. When somebody throws out some kind of stat that Joe thinks, oh, wait a minute, Where'd you get that? Hey, Jamie, can you look that up or whatever, you know? Because he'll prove him wrong right there and then. So you have to go prepared.
Sure.
So you know that if you're going to one of these guys that do this professionally, you're going to have to know your stuff cold.
Mm.
Okay? And that's extremely important. That's number one. But number two, let the other party engage because otherwise it's just one massive, gunfire. And personally, I don't appreciate it,
Yeah.
you know?
Um, One of the things I wanted to bring up in terms of like see through people's masks, the law of playing, was kids, right? Like little kids. They Do you think that they have a mask, or is that something they haven't developed yet?
I'm going to get in trouble on this, I think. I think all kids are little angels that should be protected and loved dearly and never hurt. Okay? I also think that the other side of that coin, and I think they're genuine. But I think that they also know how to manipulate their parents at a very young age. I think that kids have, the laws of human nature down cold. They cry, they get a tablet, or they cry, they get ice cream, so they know that by crying, they get what they want. And so I think they're masters at
So you
manipulation.
think the mask gets put on pretty
I
quickly in
think so.
life? Yeah.
I think so. At the same
Interesting.
time, I think they're genuine and they're beautiful, and it's up to the parents to provide guidance.
Yeah, like you see a kid that, oh, that kid will tell you, oh, you're ugly, or you're this, or you're that, and they don't hold in what maybe one is actually thinking.
Well, a lot of your right. So, did you finish your thought? Did I interrupt you? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, that that's it.
Well, a lot of the insecurities are stem from childhood, and kids are,
Oh,
you know,
bullying.
bullying and stuff like
Yeah,
that. And kids are, and again, what do I know, right? I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, so just my opinion. But um, a lot of the insecurities stem from childhood,
yeah,
and kids are brutal to tell you the truth. Like if you're ugly, you're ugly. If you have a big nose, they'll tell you, hey, you have a huge nose,
yeah,
this and that, or whatever. And you have to deal with it, okay? Because they're brutal. They're telling you exactly how they see it.
yeah,
I think the mask gets modified
and put
as
on.
we get
Yeah,
older. Your first impression is, oh man, that guy's ugly. But you're not going to tell him to his face.
no.
When you're a kid, you will.
Now I remember
Or,
one of
you're fat, you're short, you're whatever the case is.
I remember my nephew. Maybe they were around a year, maybe even less than a year, but let's just say a year. And it was at a big family party, and the type of person that is very like outgoing, social, and smiley and laughing with people, but he was being held by somebody, and he was happy, but a lady came up to him at a party, a family party, and this lady is not a nice lady, is known to be not the friendliest, and came up to him and wanted to pick him up, and he didn't want to be picked up by her, and he let everybody know. And so she tried to pick him up and everything, and he was not wanting it. He didn't want to go with her, and so she gave up. Oh, okay, all right, she'll move on. And and then he was okay again, and I that stuck with me. This is a long time ago now, many years ago, but it stuck with me that he's genuine. I feel at that point there's no mask. He didn't want to be there.
No.
He knew that lady was not, whether it's the vibes of the lady, whether he had maybe had a previous interaction with this lady, maybe just the look of the lady, who knows? But something he didn't want to be. And then you look at
Okay, how
other
old was he?
a year old.
Wow.
And then you look at other people, and babies are drawn to them. They have something that they can make a baby smile, you know? Uh, they just have something. And the baby, I think,
Can
at
see
an
through
early
the bull.
age, yeah, I think that they already understand these observational skills and they go based on feeling, like the feeling that they get from somebody.
Brute force,
And I,
it's just, it's like a diamond in the rough, right?
yeah,
They get polished on later on, but right there and then they're gonna let you have it the way they see it. And he's not comfortable. I don't want you to pick me up, and I'm
yeah.
not gonna do it.
And I think there's something to that. Like he's going based off of feeling, and then later on in life, we observe maybe less. We go less off of feeling, off of gut, and we just go based off of words. And that's the thing I found very interesting, that Robert Greene is saying, don't pay attention to what they're saying, pay attention to how they make you feel, pay attention to the second language, which is body language, gestures, move, eyes.
The tone
He
of their voice.
The tone of their voice, the pupils,
Crazy.
the tone of their voice, the pitch was an interesting one because he's saying that when you can't fake.
Wow.
You can fake a smile, you can fake excitement in body language, but you can't fake the pitch of the voice. He gave an example of somebody who was excited has a higher pitch, or somebody who's, let's say, extremely, in an interview I've seen him talk about someone who's extremely like angry at something or
Mm-hmm.
really bothered, their voice like vibrates, like they're so upset that even though they might be trying to put on a smile and say things are okay, oh, everything's okay with words, the voice is telling you something different. Pay attention to the voice. I mean, you could get lost in this.
You can. The other issue that I found extremely interesting, and that, first you're reading it and you're thinking, oh, yeah, you pick up on this, that, and whatever. But then he gave the example of the mistake on, what is it, the Othello, where he is questioning the wife about whether or not she had an infidelity. And she gets super nervous, and he interprets the nervousness as confirmation that she was being unfaithful, and she wasn't.
Right.
So, all of these pointers, all of this stuff that you're looking at, you pick them up, and then you better interpret it properly.
Yeah.
So, it's not just being aware of the second language and the body language and picking up all these tips and pieces of what's going on in that conversation and so forth, but it's also interpreting them
Correctly.
correctly. Because in this case, he was sure that she was being unfaithful, and the fact was that she wasn't. He
That's a
was just nervous because he was interrogating her with that loud voice and that, and so, it makes it more complicated.
It does. This is I think that's a really good point.
Oh,
Context is a big one.
oh, so you're picking up all this stuff and you're thinking, aha, I got you. And this is, but are you interpreting this properly?
Actually, I wrote that down as well
Oh, okay.
because he says things like micro expressions. Like if you tell somebody, you can actually test it out. So you can tell somebody you had a success in something.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I just won this award. And then before the words come out or the smile or anything, there may be a micro expression, one of like jealousy, envy. Um, he says you catch people off guard, catch them off guard, like surprise them. How do they react? Reminds me one time a coworker I accidentally surprised. I was trying to surprise my sister. I surprised the coworker and I jumped out in front of her, scared her, and she screamed. Um, that's not what he's referring to, but he's saying catch people off guard. But he says
You
before
scared the wrong person.
I scared the wrong person. Before you jump to conclusions, see if you see that multiple times. Don't just take one observation and take it as fact, like Othello that he brought up. have multiple confirmation that this is the way that they're reacting.
Well, we were talking about some of this the other day in the other law,
Hmm.
and with the onset of computers and emails and
Yeah,
texting and stuff like that, the face-to-face conversation is not as often.
yeah,
A lot of our negotiations, for example, this escrow we just closed yesterday, right? Or Friday. We closed this escrow. We've been talking to um, the selling agent for a little bit over 2 months, and it's all been by email, texting, and phone. We never met the guy.
right.
We've been over slightly over 2 months or 2 months talking to this gentleman, negotiating with this gentleman, all kinds of items on that escrow, and we have never met this guy.
We met him, but we haven't met him physically
Oh, well, okay.
because so we wouldn't be able to pick up body language. We wouldn't be able to pick up,
Well,
let's
you
say,
wouldn't be able to pick him up in the crowd because you don't know what he looks like.
right, but you can pick up the pitch, the voice,
Yeah.
the tone.
Okay. I'll
So
buy
you got
that.
to work with what you got.
Right. Right.
So you can still, there's tone in texts. And that's one thing you talk about. Like, you don't like texting
No.
sometimes because it doesn't work well with you. Well,
No.
guess what? Every time I would call this agent, he would text me back. He preferred that fashion of communication. So you got to work with what you got.
I
Some
agree
people don't
totally.
want in person.
Huh?
Some people don't want an in person. They want to
Okay.
hide, let's say, behind, they feel more comfortable
Technology.
behind technology
I,
because it allows maybe less observation of them.
I agree.
So we got to get good in all forms of communication.
Totally agree with you in every aspect.
But I agree with you that you can't
You
implement all of
you
these.
can't because look at this. We're closing deals and we didn't get to see that guy.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked
Yeah.
to him. We get the impression that he's a good person,
Sure.
right?
Sure. Yeah.
And he worked with us on many of our requests, and we worked with him on many of his requests, and that's what negotiating is all about, right?
Yes.
But we don't know the guy. We wouldn't be
Yes.
able to pick him out of a crowd. That's number one. I don't know if he's tall, skinny, dark, handsome,
But
blue-eyed, whatever.
those things don't really, I don't think they apply in terms of like
I agree. I agree.
getting to
But
know
what I'm saying
somebody.
is technology is taking away a little bit of this.
Mm, yeah. You got to work with less.
We
Yeah.
You got to work with what you've got, and I agree with you. And you know, but
Yeah.
I think that in overall, being aware of all these things
Hmm.
will allow you to do a better job, even with the guy that only wants to do texting
Yeah.
or whatever. Because when I text, I don't like texting and email
Right.
because once you put a word out, if it's not in the right context, you should see how many times when I'm doing a business and I'm texting, before I hit that send,
Yeah. Yeah.
I review that text, I'm telling you, Mike, maybe 4 or 5 times.
I believe it.
And I change words around to make it sound better or whatever. I
Yeah.
think this is too harsh or whatever, you know.
It's different because also
Email too. Email
email
also.
too. Because also when you say something, like somebody will remember the tone, how you made them feel, the words, but they may not exactly remember the exact words, quote by quote. But in a text, you can go back to the exact words. No, you said this exactly. It's different. It's different. It's not a conversation like,
Right. Well, okay, you just brought up a good, in the business world that we're in,
mhm.
we need the email to create a paper trail,
Yeah,
okay? Because we have contingencies and we have time frames that we have to meet.
it's different in
So it's
business.
different. So
Yeah,
yeah, I see the fact. I understand and I'm with you. I'm more old school. You're younger. I mean, I'm what, 33 years older than you, 32 years older
32.
than you. So it's I'm more old school, you know. So I want more the interaction. Uh,
Yeah, you like the
I do.
in-person
Yeah.
interaction.
Or we'll get on a conversation. We'll get on a three-way call. And in a three-way call, I can express with my tone of voice and whatever and put some I want this, but I don't want it to sound so harshly, but we mean business. This is what we want.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I hear you, and I know that's your preferred method, but we have to, in the world of business, in real life, we have to figure out,
Right,
it may not be the other person's preferred method, and so we have to adjust.
right.
Like the newer generation, do they want that in person? I don't know what the answer is. Maybe some people do, maybe some people don't.
Well, I've heard it time and time again that the newer generation does not want,
Yeah,
you know, just email me or text me, preferably email, and
yeah,
let's get it done. Well,
yeah.
look,
it, it's different. It's different. So I think we just have to adjust.
we do. We have
I
to
think
adjust. There's
that
no way
this
around it.
this still applies though. I think the
So do I.
I think that the law 3, whether people are wearing a mask, you got to be able to read it whether it's in a text, but it makes it more challenging, I would say.
Correct. Well, there was
Um
that example that he gave. Did you read about the example where he gets 4 or 5 interns and takes them to the hospital and says, "Look, I need you to observe this lady and figure out what kind of illness does she have."
this is Erickson, right?
Right. So he takes 4 or 5 interns, takes them to the hospital, walks them into a room where there was a lady lying down in the bed, and says, "I need you to observe her. I'm gonna give you some time, and you try to figure out what kind of illness she has that um, keeps her bedridden." Okay, and they were there for 3 hours observing the lady, just observing. Okay, they come out and they couldn't tell Milton Erickson what was wrong with the lady. Why was she bedridden? And the answer was both her legs have been amputated, but they failed to see that she both her legs were amputated. Now, there's a lot that goes to the story, and some people would say, "Well, that's kind of deceiving because he said, tell me why." I don't know that he said, "What illness does she have?" I think he said, "Why is she, bedridden? Tell me, what do you think? Or what illness?" So that might be a little deceiving. But the fact of the matter is that
They didn't notice.
their power of observation was not keen enough to pick up on the mere fact that both her legs were amputated. And that's the reason she was bedridden.
I mean,
And so, it goes back to observe, observe, observe.
even in the medical profession, which your uncle
Mm-hmm.
was a cardiologist, right?
Yeah.
And I would hear stories about he could see somebody even in his older age, and he would be able to observe. And that there was a few times one guy came over to visit the house. He was already older, your uncle, and your uncle said once the gentleman left, he said, he's got what,
6 months to live.
6 months to live.
And my God, yeah, he
And
died
things.
6 months later. So I don't know. Yeah,
So he
that's
he was he observed things that others weren't observing, and in the medical profession, if a doctor doesn't even look at you, what are they gonna observe?
well, a lot of things have changed. A lot of people would say that diagnostics nowadays are more dependent on lab results, x-rays, techniques, right? Where prior to all this technology, the doctor needed to be more keen to, the color of your eyes, the
The
sclera, if it
color of your
was your
skin.
skin, if you were turning yellowish, you might have a liver problem, blah,
Yeah,
blah, blah. So there was a lot more emphasis put in the medical history and doing the medical examination. A medical examination would take 45 minutes to an hour.
wow.
Now, I hear the pediatrician give patients 10 minutes. And what can you
Yeah,
do in 10 minutes? So, it's like you said, you have to adjust and
yeah,
try to look, try to see the good in everything and improve with what you've got. And what
yeah.
can you do? This is the world we live in.
It is, and I think for all professions or just in daily life, the more listening we do,
The better,
the more observing we do, the better.
the better.
Yeah,
It's, well,
it's difficult.
it's how we learn and how we grow as human beings. One of the laws that, don't think you're better than anybody. That's number one. Just keep yourself grounded and leveled so that you know that we're all pretty much equal. There may be one guy that, or lady that's smarter than the next, okay? But for the most part, you don't have to be preponderant about it or give an air of superiority with people,
Hmm.
you know? Because at the end of the day, life is short. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
And so you want to help everybody that you can possibly come across and touch, you know? That's, I think, the message. So you observe, 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 listen, listen, listen. It's how you really pick up a lot of these cues. And then the other part of it is interpreting them correctly.
You know, the interpretation piece, I think, I think that's extremely important
Oh yeah, it makes
because
it super complicated.
like, so the homework would be haven't when you have a conversation with somebody before you go into that, try and pick up certain things, and then afterwards write them down in notes. One of the things that I do in practice, and you and I are constantly bouncing it around, something will happen, an interaction in a negotiation mostly, and then I try to predict what the person's next move is going to be. And then based on all the information that we have, we kind of try and compare, what do you think's going to happen? What do I think's going to happen? Cuz the ball is on their court, right? And then sometimes we get it right, sometimes
But you've been, to your credit, you've been pretty good at it. You've only missed you've been pretty good at it. I think you got a good track record.
I've gotten close. But it's using observation and then actually trying to predict.
And nothing's perfect, folks. You know, him and I are together a tremendous amount of time, and you got this little sarcastic little smile that I can tell when you comes on. And we have our moments too,
Oh
right?
yeah, we're always joking around and
Joking around and
trying to keep things light
yeah. But
and
yeah,
fun.
you've been pretty good on calling some of these. Um,
Yeah, I've been trying to predict, like in chess, what moves can the person make, which one do I think they're going to make. And I think that's where this is really useful in life. um
it's amazing, you know, this guy Erickson. Wow, he would be one scary cat. I wouldn't know how to walk into his office and walk from the door to, because
oh
he did
yeah,
it on purpose. He
yeah,
put the seat as far away from the door as possible, way on the other side, so he could watch his patients walk. And he picked up a lot on people's walks.
yeah,
It's amazing.
on the walk.
Can you imagine?
Like, do you notice people's walks?
That's
Like, are you observing? The other thing Robert Greene says is, don't be obviously observing. Like, don't be too much, make too much eye contact, don't stare at people. We were at
yeah.
a
You can
we were at
go
a
crazy with this.
yeah, because then they'll notice they're being observed and they're gonna act different. We were at an event the other day, and I noticed this lady staring at different people. She was staring at different, just staring and not saying anything, not anything, just a stare. It was weird, like, why, why are you just staring at random people, not talking to them, not approaching them? So, anyways, you come out, you're gonna be obvious if you're just staring at
People
people.
watching.
I mean, people. I guess I enjoy people watching.
Well, then
Um,
you were one of those two.
yeah, maybe, but I'm not just blank staring at, or not just staring like that. Like, I'll look at something and move around. I'm not just like. The last thing I wanted to bring up was mirroring, which is another thing when you're typically in person.
Right.
You see somebody with their arms crossed. A lot of times, you cross your arms. If you see somebody standing a certain way or holding their hands a certain way, you tend to mirror, or the other person tends to mirror you. Um, I just thought that's an interesting point because that's body language, and based on your posture, some people say if you have your arms crossed, you're not that open to a new ideas, or like we were having a conversation, a very interesting conversation, and the person we were speaking to had arms open, legs open. So that would give the
Impression.
impression of they're open to a conversation the it was engaging. They were kind of leaning forward. All of those things are things that
Right,
you can
right,
pick up
right.
on. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to throw in.
Well, one thing comes to mind. Like I say, I am on social media way too much for my own good. And there's one guy, this cowboy guy, he comes out with a big, huge hat, and he says, "Look, the most dangerous man in the room is the quiet man, not the guy that's screaming at the top of his lungs or whatever. No, that guy screaming potentially is the most insecure person."
Mm,
And he's got this big, huge hat, and he goes, and he's giving you pointers about his life, and he's in his 60s, I'm sure. And he says, the most dangerous man in the room is the one that's quiet.
hmm,
That's the one that it's in self control.
yeah.
He's watching, he's picking up your cues, he's um, seeing where you're weak, where you're not, if you're lying, if you're not. And I love to play poker, and it just reminds me, of a poker game
Yeah.
where this other guy, what was his name? He wins all kinds of gold medals and stuff like that. He's the guy with the little beard. Well, there's a bunch of them, but he says, hey, every movement at the poker table is a piece of information. And, I think these poker players, the ones that make it to the world.
Even the eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
Like we'll end with uh, a quote in Scarface.
Oh, Scarface.
The eyes, Chico, they never lie.
They never lie. Or the other one, he says, I always tell the truth, even when I'm lying.
There you go. Thank you.
We're having fun.